"You're just a jealous underachiever." Vincent Coleman laughed, his voice dripping with condescension as he leaned back in his leather chair. "Who's going to believe you over me?" The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in his corner office at Crimson Harbor Group, casting harsh shadows across his smug face. I stood there, clutching the HR document that had changed everything, feeling the weight of his dismissal like a physical blow. My name is Dana Bell, and I'm 39 years old. For the past 7 years, I've worked as a senior financial analyst at Crimson Harbor Group, a mid-sized investment firm in Norfolk, Virginia. I had always prided myself on attention to detail. It's what made me good at my job, catching discrepancies in quarterly reports that others missed, ensuring our clients' portfolios remained pristine. But this particular detail I'd uncovered wasn't about numbers or market trends. It was about the man sitting across from me, the man who had just called me jealous and pathetic. Vincent had been my direct supervisor for 3 years, ever since his meteoric rise from junior associate to regional director. Everyone marveled at how quickly he'd climbed the corporate ladder, how effortlessly he seemed to navigate complex financial strategies, his confident presentations to clients, his easy rapport with senior management, his apparent mastery of advanced financial theory. It all painted a picture of someone destined for success. I had admired him too at first. The document in my hands told a different story entirely. It was a simple HR verification form, one that had somehow ended up mixed in with my quarterly performance reviews. Most people would have glanced at it and moved on, but my analytical mind couldn't ignore what I was seeing. Vincent's master's degree, the credential that had supposedly qualified him for his rapid promotions, was listed as coming from something called Westminster Business Institute. The name itself seemed legitimate enough, but something nagged at me. "Vincent," I had said, approaching him cautiously that morning, "I think there might be an error in your personnel file. This school listed on your education background. I can't find any information about it online." His reaction had been immediate and telling. The color drained from his face for just a moment before he recovered, grabbing the document from my hands with unnecessary force. "That's confidential information, Dana. You had no business looking at it." "It was mixed in with my files," I explained. "I was just trying to help." That's when he'd launched into his tirade about jealousy and underachievement, making it clear that questioning him was a career-limiting move. But as I stood there listening to his threats, watching the way his hands trembled slightly as he clutched that paper, I knew I had stumbled onto something much bigger than a simple clerical error. The seeds of my suspicion had actually been planted months earlier, though I hadn't recognized them at the time. It started with small things, inconsistencies in Vincent's knowledge that I'd attributed to different educational backgrounds or professional experiences. During client meetings, he would sometimes fumble with financial concepts that should have been second nature to someone with his supposed credentials. When pressed for details about advanced portfolio theory, he'd deflect with charm and redirect the conversation. I had grown up in a family that valued education above all else. My parents, both teachers, had instilled in me a deep respect for genuine learning and hard work. My father taught mathematics at the local high school, while my mother worked as a librarian at Norfolk State University. They had sacrificed to put me through college, working extra jobs to ensure I could focus on my studies without the burden of overwhelming student debt. The idea that someone might fake their educational credentials felt like a personal affront to everything my family stood for. My relationship with Vincent had started professionally enough. When he first arrived at Crimson Harbor Group, I was assigned to help him transition into his role. He was charming, confident, and seemingly knowledgeable about the industry. We worked well together on several projects, and I found myself genuinely enjoying our professional collaboration. He had a way of making even the most tedious financial analyses seem engaging, always ready with a joke or an encouraging word when deadlines loomed. But as time went on, I began to notice the cracks in his facade. During team meetings, he would often defer to my expertise on matters where he should have taken the lead. When clients asked detailed questions about investment strategies, he would subtly redirect them to me or other team members. At first, I thought he was being collaborative, sharing the spotlight. Now I wondered if he simply didn't know the answers. The revelation about his credentials explained so much. His defensive reaction when anyone questioned his methods, his tendency to rely heavily on subordinates for technical expertise, his remarkable ability to avoid situations where his knowledge might be tested. I thought about all the times I had covered for him without realizing it, all the presentations where I had provided the substance while he delivered the style. What troubled me most was the unfairness of it all. I had earned my bachelor's degree in finance through years of hard work and genuine study. I had built my career slowly, methodically, proving myself at each step. Vincent, meanwhile, had seemingly leapfrogged over more qualified candidates through deception. How many other deserving employees had been passed over for promotions because of his fraudulent credentials? As I left his office that day, my mind was already working through the implications. This wasn't just about one man's dishonesty. It was about the integrity of our entire organization. If Vincent could fool HR and senior management with fake credentials, what did that say about our hiring processes? What did it say about the due diligence we claimed to perform for our clients? I had always been someone who followed the rules, who believed that hard work and honesty would eventually be rewarded. But Vincent's success, despite his deception, was forcing me to confront an uncomfortable truth about the corporate world. The next morning arrived with an email that shouldn't have surprised me, but still sent a chill down my spine. "Dana, please report to HR immediately," the message read. No explanation, no context, just a summons that felt ominous in its brevity. I had barely slept the night before, my mind racing through everything I knew about Vincent's background, everything I suspected about his fraudulent credentials. Helen Rodriguez, our HR director, was waiting for me with a folder already prepared. Her usually warm demeanor seemed strained, and she avoided making direct eye contact as I sat down across from her desk. "Dana, I'm afraid we need to discuss some changes to your position here at Crimson Harbor Group." The word "changes" hung in the air like a sword waiting to fall. I had been with the company for 7 years, had consistently received excellent performance reviews, had never had so much as a disciplinary conversation. Yet somehow I found myself sitting in a termination meeting less than 24 hours after confronting Vincent about his fake degree. "Due to organizational restructuring," Helen continued, reading from what was obviously a prepared script, "we're eliminating several positions in the financial analysis department. Unfortunately, your role is one of those being discontinued." I listened to her carefully neutral words, noting how she avoided specifics about this supposed restructuring, no mention of which other positions were being eliminated, no timeline for when these changes had been decided, no explanation for why someone with my tenure and performance record would be the first to go. It was a masterclass in corporate speak, designed to provide legal cover, while revealing nothing of substance. "What about severance?" I asked, keeping my voice steady, despite the anger building inside me. "You'll receive 2 weeks of pay, and of course, we'll provide a positive reference for your job search," Helen replied, sliding a termination letter across the desk. The paper felt flimsy in my hands, inadequate for something that was supposed to represent the end of 7 years of my professional life. As I read through the document, I noticed something interesting. The effective date of my termination was listed as today, but the letter itself was dated 3 days ago. Either someone had remarkable foresight about my need for restructuring, or this termination had been planned before I ever walked into Vincent's office with questions about his credentials. I signed the paperwork without argument, gathered my personal belongings from my desk, and walked out of Crimson Harbor Group for what I assumed would be the last time. My colleagues watched me go with confused expressions. After all, there had been no announcement about restructuring, no company-wide communication about eliminating positions. From their perspective, one of their most reliable team members was simply vanishing without explanation. But as I drove home that afternoon, I wasn't thinking about my sudden unemployment or the challenge of finding a new job at 39. Instead, I was thinking about the manila folder I had carefully prepared the night before, the one sitting in my home office containing photocopies of every document related to Vincent's credentials. I was thinking about justice, about integrity, and about the fact that sometimes the only way to fight corruption is to stop playing by the corrupt person's rules. That evening, I sat in my home office surrounded by printouts, photocopies, and the glowing screen of my laptop. What had started as simple curiosity about Vincent's credentials had evolved into something much more comprehensive. I had spent the previous night, after our confrontation, diving deep into research that painted an increasingly damning picture of deception. The Westminster Business Institute, the school listed on Vincent's master's degree, simply did not exist. Not as a defunct institution, not as a recently closed school, not even as a questionable diploma mill. I had searched through databases of accredited institutions, checked with state education departments, and even looked into international schools with similar names. There was absolutely no record of any legitimate educational institution called Westminster Business Institute ever operating anywhere. But the deeper I dug, the more sophisticated Vincent's deception appeared. The documents in his personnel file weren't just simple forgeries. They were elaborate constructions that had clearly required significant planning and resources. The letterhead looked professional, the signatures appeared authentic, and the formatting matched what you might expect from a legitimate institution. Someone had put considerable effort into creating these false credentials. Using my access to professional databases, I had traced Vincent's employment history more carefully than any HR department apparently had. His previous position had been with a small financial planning firm in Richmond that had closed down 2 years ago. Conveniently, this made verification of his performance and responsibilities nearly impossible. Before that, he had worked for an investment company in Charlotte. But when I called their main number, I discovered they had no record of anyone named Vincent Coleman ever being employed there. The pattern was becoming clear. Vincent had constructed an entire professional persona built on institutions that no longer existed or had never existed in the first place. Each lie had been carefully crafted to be difficult to verify. Each deception designed to exploit the fact that most employers don't dig too deeply into references from companies that have closed, or schools with similar names to legitimate institutions. What made his fraud even more audacious was the timeline. According to his resume, he had earned his master's degree while supposedly working full-time at the Charlotte investment firm. The degree was dated just 6 months before he applied for his position at Crimson Harbor Group. Even if Westminster Business Institute had been real, the timeline would have been suspicious. Completing a graduate degree in finance while maintaining a demanding full-time job would have been nearly impossible. I printed out everything I had found, screenshots of my searches showing no results for Westminster Business Institute, documentation of the closed companies he claimed to have worked for, analysis of the timeline inconsistencies in his resume. I also included copies of internal company documents that showed how heavily the firm had relied on his supposed expertise when making hiring decisions and promoting him over other candidates. The most damning evidence came from cross-referencing Vincent's claimed graduation date with publicly available information about graduation ceremonies. I had found photos and news coverage of several legitimate business schools' graduation ceremonies from that same year. None of them showed any sign of a Westminster Business Institute ceremony, and none of the guest speakers or award recipients mentioned in his fake transcripts appeared at any real events. As I organized the evidence, I realized I had uncovered something that went beyond simple resume padding. Vincent hadn't just exaggerated his qualifications, he had created an entirely fictional educational background and used it to secure a position of significant responsibility at a financial services firm. Our clients trusted us with their life savings, their retirement funds, their children's college funds. They deserved to know that the people managing their money had earned their positions through legitimate qualifications. The question now was what to do with this information. Vincent had made it clear that challenging him would be career suicide, and his swift retaliation for my initial inquiry had proven that point. But sitting in my home office, surrounded by evidence of his elaborate deception, I knew I couldn't simply walk away and let his fraud continue unchallenged. The next morning brought a phone call that changed everything. Brenda Walsh, our company's board secretary, reached out to me directly, something that had never happened in my 7 years at Crimson Harbor Group. Her voice was carefully measured, but I could detect an undercurrent of urgency that immediately caught my attention. "Dana, I hope you don't mind me calling you at home," she began. "I heard about your departure from the company, and I wanted to reach out personally. Could we perhaps meet for coffee this afternoon? There are some things I'd like to discuss with you." The invitation was unusual enough that I accepted immediately. Brenda suggested a small cafe downtown, away from the financial district where we might encounter other Crimson Harbor employees. When I arrived, I found her already seated in a corner booth, her expression more serious than I had ever seen it during board meetings. "Dana, I need to be direct with you," she said, after we had ordered. "Your termination yesterday raised some red flags with several board members. The timing, the stated reason, the lack of advance notice, none of it aligned with what we understood about the company's staffing plans." I chose my words carefully. "I was told it was due to restructuring in the financial analysis department." Brenda's laugh was humorless. "There is no restructuring planned for the financial analysis department. In fact, the board just approved a budget increase for that division last month. Vincent Coleman requested additional resources, specifically citing the strong performance of his team." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Not only had Vincent lied about the reason for my termination, but he had actually been arguing for more resources for our department, while simultaneously orchestrating my dismissal. The audacity of his deception was breathtaking. "There's something else," Brenda continued, lowering her voice. "You're not the first person to raise questions about Vincent's credentials. About 18 months ago, Jennifer Morrison in HR mentioned some inconsistencies she had noticed in his file. She was told by management that the matter had been resolved, but she never felt satisfied with the explanation she received." Jennifer Morrison. I remembered her well. She'd been a thorough, detail-oriented HR analyst who had left the company rather suddenly for what was described as a better opportunity elsewhere. Now I wondered if her departure had been as voluntary as it had appeared. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Brenda paused, clearly weighing her words. "Because the board takes fiduciary responsibility seriously. If there are questions about the qualifications of someone in Vincent's position, we need to investigate them properly. But we need more than just suspicions or second-hand concerns." The implication was clear. She was asking if I had evidence, not just doubts. I thought about the folder sitting in my home office, the comprehensive documentation I had assembled over the past 2 days. I thought about Jennifer Morrison, who had apparently tried to raise these same concerns through official channels and had been silenced. I thought about all the clients who trusted our firm with their financial futures. "I may have some information that would be relevant to such an investigation," I said carefully. Brenda's eyes sharpened with interest. "What kind of information?" "The kind that would need to be reviewed by people with the authority to act on it." We talked for another hour, with Brenda explaining the board's concerns about governance and oversight. She made it clear that they had been unaware of the questions surrounding Vincent's credentials, and that my termination had been the first they had heard of any issues in his department. By the time we parted ways, we had agreed on a plan that would allow me to present my findings to the appropriate board members while protecting both of us from potential retaliation. That night, I composed the most important email of my professional life. The recipient list included all 5 members of Crimson Harbor Group's board of directors, along with the firm's general counsel and external auditing team. The subject line was simple, but devastating. Urgent, credentialing fraud and governance concerns. I kept the email itself brief and factual, letting the attached evidence speak for itself. I explained how I had discovered the discrepancies in Vincent's credentials, detailed my attempts to address the matter through proper channels, and documented the swift retaliation that had followed. Most importantly, I attached the comprehensive folder of evidence I had compiled, organized into clear categories that told a story of systematic deception. The evidence packet included screenshots of my searches showing that Westminster Business Institute had never existed, documentation proving that Vincent's previous employers had no record of his employment, analysis of the timeline inconsistencies in his claimed educational history, and copies of the forged documents from his personnel file. I had also included a detailed comparison of his fake diploma with templates I had found online, showing how the formatting and language matched known diploma mill operations. But the most powerful piece of evidence was something I had discovered during my final day of research. Using LinkedIn and professional databases, I had tracked down 3 other individuals who claimed degrees from Westminster Business Institute. All 3 worked at financial services firms in different states. All 3 had suspicious employment histories similar to Vincent's, and all 3 had been hired within the past 5 years. This wasn't just about one man's deception. It appeared to be part of a larger pattern of credential fraud in the financial services industry. I sent the email at 11:30 p.m. on a Wednesday night, knowing that it would be waiting in their inboxes when they arrived at work the next morning. I also sent copies to my personal email account and saved everything to a secure cloud storage service, just in case anyone tried to claim that the evidence had been fabricated or tampered with. The response was swifter than I had expected. By 8 a.m. Thursday morning, I received a call from James Patterson, the chairman of Crimson Harbor's board. His voice was tense but professional as he thanked me for bringing these concerns to their attention and asked if I would be available for an emergency board meeting that afternoon. "We take these allegations very seriously," he said. "The board will need to review all of this evidence carefully and determine the appropriate course of action. Would you be willing to present your findings in person?" I agreed immediately, though I insisted on having my own attorney present for the meeting. The stakes were too high, and Vincent's swift retaliation for my initial inquiry had taught me the importance of protecting myself legally. As I prepared for the board meeting, I reflected on how quickly everything had escalated. Just 3 days ago, I had been a satisfied employee with a stable career and a decent relationship with my supervisor. Now I was preparing to present evidence of fraud to the board of directors, evidence that could potentially destroy Vincent's career and expose serious problems with the company's hiring and oversight processes. But I felt no regret about the path I had chosen. Vincent's deception wasn't a victimless crime. It had real implications for our clients, our colleagues, and the integrity of the financial services industry. His fake credentials had given him authority over millions of dollars in client assets and influence over investment decisions that affected real people's financial futures. The board meeting was scheduled for 4 p.m. that Thursday afternoon, less than 48 hours after Vincent had fired me for asking uncomfortable questions about his background. The emergency board meeting convened in Crimson Harbor Group's main conference room at exactly 4 p.m. that Thursday afternoon. I sat at the polished mahogany table with my attorney, facing 5 board members whose expressions ranged from concerned to incredulous. Vincent was not present. He had been asked to take a temporary leave of absence that morning while the board conducted their investigation. James Patterson, the board chairman, called the meeting to order with unusual formality. "We're here to review serious allegations regarding credential fraud and to determine the appropriate response. Dana, would you please walk us through your findings?" I began with the discovery of the misplaced HR document, explaining how my natural attention to detail had led me to question the legitimacy of Westminster Business Institute. Using a large monitor, I displayed my research results, showing screenshot after screenshot of searches that yielded no evidence of the school's existence. Board member Patricia Hendricks, a former federal prosecutor, leaned forward as I presented the timeline analysis. "You're saying he claimed to earn a master's degree while working full-time at a company that has no record of employing him?" "That's correct. And the timeline inconsistencies suggest he fabricated not just his education, but significant portions of his employment history as well." The room fell silent as I revealed the most damning evidence: the 3 other individuals with degrees from the same non-existent institution, all working in financial services, all hired within the past 5 years. The implications were staggering. This wasn't an isolated incident, but potentially part of a broader credential fraud scheme targeting the financial industry. When I finished my presentation, the board members exchanged meaningful glances. Patterson spoke first. "This is far more extensive than we initially understood. If these findings are accurate, we're looking at a complete fabrication of professional qualifications." The general counsel, who had been taking detailed notes throughout my presentation, cleared his throat. We'll need to conduct a formal investigation, but based on this evidence, immediate action is warranted. We also need to consider our regulatory obligations. This kind of fraud could have serious implications with FINRA and other oversight bodies. The board's investigation moved with startling efficiency. Within a week, they had confirmed every aspect of my findings and uncovered additional evidence of Vincent's deception. The Human Resources Department conducted a comprehensive audit of his file, revealing that several reference letters had been forged and that background check procedures had been inadequately followed during his hiring process. More importantly, the board discovered that Vincent's fraudulent credentials had directly influenced several major client investment decisions. His supposed expertise in advanced portfolio theory had been cited in presentations to institutional clients, and his fake master's degree had been highlighted in marketing materials designed to attract high-net-worth individuals. The fallout was swift and comprehensive. Vincent was terminated for cause, with no severance package and no positive references. The board filed reports with relevant regulatory agencies, triggering industry-wide investigations into credential fraud. Several clients initiated civil lawsuits after learning that their investments had been managed by someone with falsified qualifications. But the board's response went beyond simply removing Vincent from his position. They offered me not just my old job back, but a promotion to Vincent's former role as regional director. They also implemented new policies requiring enhanced background checks and third-party verification of all educational credentials for employees in fiduciary positions. Your diligence in uncovering this fraud protected our clients and our company's reputation, Patterson told me during our follow-up meeting. We want to ensure that someone with your integrity and attention to detail is in a position to prevent similar problems in the future. The promotion came with a significant salary increase and expanded responsibilities, but more importantly, it validated my belief that honesty and careful work could ultimately triumph over deception and corruption. Vincent's attempt to silence me through retaliation had instead led to his own exposure and my professional advancement. I had transformed from victim to victor, and the company had emerged stronger and more ethical in the process. Looking back on my revenge journey, I realized that seeking justice had required patience, preparation, and an unwavering commitment to truth, qualities that would serve me well in my new leadership role and in all the challenges that lay ahead.